U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
How'd you spend your
listeners?
How'd you spend your Fourth?
Oh, mostly just relaxing with my son. Not doing too much.
That's the best thing to do. Just chill out. Senator, you put something together called the Charles Duncan Buried with Honor Act, and where are you in the process of this now?
So this legislation would address a very sad story from Little Rock. Mr. Duncan was a Navy veteran. He was financially insolvent when he passed away, so the Department of Veterans Affairs took on the responsibility for his burial, but the National Cemetery in Little Rock is full, therefore they buried him in the Fort Smith Cemetery. His family was unable to attend once they learned of his death, and then has been unable to visit his gravesite. My legislation would simply say if a national cemetery is full, as is the case in Little Rock, then the Department of Veterans Affairs can bury an indigent veteran in a state cemetery, as we have in North Little Rock or in Birdeye over in East Arkansas. I testified last week before the Veterans Affairs Committee. We received a very positive response, and the committee has endorsed that legislation. So I hope we can move it forward later this year as maybe a package of a larger veterans reforms measures.
What other veterans reforms measures are you looking at, or is the Senate looking at this point?
So I have other proposals. One, for instance, would try to revamp some of the job training programs within the Department of Veterans Affairs to identify the ones that are actually succeeding and directing more money to them and directing money away from those that are failing. There's numerous other ones, trying to build upon the choice program that we passed 2 years ago that let veterans make the choice themselves of whether they want to go get care in Little Rock or Fayetteville at the VA hospital or one of the clinics, or just stay in their own home communities. So I'm hopeful that we can move a bigger package forward later this year that will include the Buried with Honor Act.
It's Senator Tom Cotton. While we're on the topic here, what progress do you feel like we're seeing with the VA as far as veterans benefits? There have been a lot of controversy over vets and wait times and some other issues there. Are we seeing some changes for the positive, or is there still a lot of work to do?
Some, but not enough, Kevin. The Veterans Choice Act 2 years ago, I think, was a small step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy at the headquarters of the Veterans Affairs Department in Washington has been very slow-moving. This is an old story. Secretary of Defense Bob Gates wrote in his memoirs that the only department harder to change and reform than the Department of Defense is the Department of Veterans Affairs. I simply think that that's an unacceptable situation, because our veterans deserve so much for keeping us free. And the people who work out on the front lines in the VA hospitals all around the country, in many cases they're veterans themselves. They want to be able to provide the best care they can for veterans, but they're too often hamstrung by outmoded and antiquated rules and bureaucratic practices. We've got to change that.
You're a vet. I mean, how does that make you feel? And do you feel like this is a problem, like you said, not with the people working the front lines, but at the top of the VA?
So I think the problem is twofold. First, it's a problem with the senior management and the bureaucracy within the headquarters that is simply so resistant to change, even more so than some of the senior management at the Pentagon. And second, it's failure to use some of the best practices, the tools, the techniques that the private sector has used for a very long time. When you think about it, Walmart, for instance, has been using express lanes for 25 or 30 years, and they've been using self-checkout lanes for probably 10 years. Those are the kind of very basic innovations that the Department of Veterans Affairs has only started using in the last 3 or 4 years. And they act like it's a great accomplishment, and I guess it's an improvement. But if Walmart can do it, or if private insurance companies, which do many of the same things the VA does in processing claims and benefits, have adopted new and innovative solutions to help get customers the best care they can 10 or 15 years ago, why can't we get that kind of management skill in the VA?
Senator Cotton, Benghazi, the final report came out there. Your thoughts on this?
Well, it confirmed a lot of what we knew and had some new and very unfortunate facts. We now know that Secretary Clinton and President Obama really did virtually nothing to try to get reinforcements to Benghazi. The point isn't whether any aircraft or Marine units could have reached Benghazi, but the fact is they really were never even sent, as the Department of State did there. I remember dozens of times in Iraq when I was on the Quick Reaction Force, and my men and I would get ready to rush out the gate because we had troops in contact, only to be told to stand down because the firefight had stopped. Or we'd get to the firefight and the enemy would have broken contact. That simply didn't happen in Benghazi. Similarly, we know that Hillary Clinton viewed Libya and the disastrous intervention there is one of her great accomplishments. That's one of the reasons why Chris Stevens was in Benghazi to begin with. The ambassador went there because they wanted to make it a permanent facility in advance of Secretary Clinton's visit. Yet Secretary Clinton never took the steps necessary to make sure that there's adequate security. Now, she and President Obama and some of his aides tried to push responsibility for these things down to the lowest level, but I can tell you that is far below the standard of care we should expect from our senior leaders, far below the standard of care we'd expect from a junior military officer.
It is Senator Tom Cotton. Thank you very much for the conversation this morning. Hope you have a great day.